Hello and welcome. This is Michele Christensen of One Noteworthy Life, and this video is going to be different than the content I usually post. So there'll be nothing about OneNote, the Getting Things Done system, personal organization, or life management, or anything like that. Today we're going to be talking about something much more personal, which is burnout, and specifically my experience of being severely burned out recently. So if this video isn't your thing, feel free to click away and I'll see you on another video. So yes, I am burned out, not on YouTube, but more so on my other work and my personal life. Creator burnout on YouTube or other platforms is a real thing. People do experience. That's just not the case for me. I'm still really, excited about doing YouTube. So I'm going to switch over to a different view. There we go. And the goal for today is to give you two ideas to consider for what to do first if you are burned out. Timestamps will be below if you want to skip around. So if you know you're burned out and you just want to skip right to the steps that I used first, you can go to the timestamps for step 0. So figuring out these first two steps was the impetus for this video. There is so much great information on burnout, but what I needed when I was at my worst was for someone to give me concrete, simple, clear action steps that were within my capacity at the time. It was like, oh my gosh, just somebody tell me what to do to feel better. And I found a lot of really great resources. There's a lot of research, a lot of books, articles, content, etc. The problem I had was that they're all really extensive and they give a lot of background and a lot of research and a lot of kind of more theory and ideas. And I just couldn't process all that and find the action step when I was at my worst. Another problem I had was that there wasn't a clear action step. There'd be suggestions like get more rest or spend time in nature, but that's not specific enough when my brain is not working well. So a final problem I encountered when trying to start my recovery process was that a lot of the advice given was out of my reach at the time. And a specific example of that is I was reading a story of a research scientist who burned out very badly at her job. And she ended up taking 2 months off at a cabin in the wilderness with very little connectivity to the outside. Now, this was not and is not currently something that I could do. First of all, I don't want to be away from my spouse and my dogs for that long. And second, when she was describing making the arrangements for being away for so long, I almost had a meltdown reading it. I don't know how someone can manage such a large project of taking care of your life to be away for 2 months. But, while I was at my worst while being burned out, I know that I couldn't. So that's why the main purpose of this video is to give you 2 small, concrete steps that are about as small and doable as I could come up with. I've labeled this a podcast on YouTube because I think I want to do at least a few more episodes, but I'm not committing to anything other than this episode right now. So just so we're all on the same page, let's talk about the definition of burnout. And this is from the World Health Organization. So burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions. So 1, feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. 2, increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. And 3, reduced professional efficacy. So I'm not sure why they specify that this is a workplace syndrome. It might be just that burnout was first identified in the workplace and maybe, some of the literature and stuff hasn't caught up. But my burnout was caused more by the work of my personal life, not my workplace. I feel like everything I've learned about burnout describes my situation clearly. It just didn't arrive from workplace stress. It was from personal stressors. So I can describe in a later video what burned me out because it wasn't work in the traditional sense. It was more like the work of handling life. I had a lot of major life events in a short period, meaning like over years, but more so than you would normally expect to happen in a period of years. I have ongoing construction that never ends on my fixer-upper house, and then just not taking enough time off, not enough vacations over a long period of years. So I feel like I sound pretty good right now, but don't let that give you the wrong impression. I'm on the road to recovery, and I also get kind of a little bit pumped up when I'm recording. But I crashed really hard, and I was in pretty bad shape for a while. So you're going to hear me talking about myself a lot, and this is because I'm not really qualified to give advice on this topic, but I can share my experience. Where I'm sharing from another source, I'll tell you that and give you the source. I have found it really helpful when people have been willing to be vulnerable and share their difficult experiences, so hopefully this helps someone. So here's some of my story. I hit what I would call almost rock bottom with burnout. I'll give you a short version here, and I can go into more detail in a later episode. So around last August, this would be August of 2022, I'm filming in June of 2023. I was exhausted, and I had periods of zero energy. Now, occasionally you'll see a story about like a celebrity or someone going into the hospital for exhaustion, and I always thought it was a cover story for whatever the real reason was that they were in the hospital for. I don't think anyone owes us an explanation of their medical conditions or why they're in the hospital. It's just that I never thought exhaustion was a real reason to be in the hospital until I felt that level of exhaustion. It was a feeling of being tired that no amount of sleep could fix. I had periods of time, not ever full days, but sections of days where I couldn't will my body to move. Like I didn't have control over what I could and couldn't do. I also had a lot of feelings of emptiness, both in my body and in my mind. Like in my body, I had this feeling of just being skin with no organs inside or muscles or skeleton or whatever. And it's weird because I don't have a sensation of those things normally being there. But when they weren't there, it was just a weird feeling of emptiness that was distinctly different from the normal experience of existing in my body. On a mental or emotional level, it was more like numbness, like I had a lack of opinions on anything, a lack of feelings, and a sense of being not quite human. So again, I'm not usually aware of the sensation of having these things, but the feeling of not having them was very uncomfortable. The final symptom I wanted to mention is that I was really easily overwhelmed. Like I live in a two-person household, and I would stare at the 8 total items in the sink and think, how on earth am I going to be able to do these breakfast dishes? And then like something like running a simple errand would take hours of psyching myself up in preparation and then hours to recover. So yeah, it was just a lot of overwhelm. Those were my 3 big symptoms, were exhaustion, emptiness, and overwhelmed. So as I mentioned, my first brush with hitting bottom was back in last August of 2022. The 2 things that helped me at that time were I had a family wedding in October and then a short vacation in November. So I had already RSVP'd to the wedding, and that I was part of the festivities. I had a role to play, so I couldn't not go. I was grateful for that because I ended up having a great time, and it really helped me to feel better. It also helped me to develop a skill set, which has been really helpful to me, and that is asking, like, what's the least I can do to fulfill my commitment for this. So in this case, for the wedding, it was a dressy event, and normally I would have put together an outfit with a dress or a skirt and heels, makeup, hairdo, etc. And I just knew I couldn't do that. The bottom line is I needed to get to the event, and I needed to be dressed well enough to honor the specialness of the event. And after all, no one's there to see me anyway, so it was fine. And I ended up putting together just a simple outfit. I wore pants and comfortable shoes, and it looked nice, and it worked great. And as a side note, I also forgot most of my makeup, and I don't usually wear a lot of makeup before a dressy event. It is nice to have makeup to put on. And I had thought about buying some while I was there, and I just didn't have the energy to do it, so I went without makeup, and it was like no big deal. I had a great time, made a lot of good memories, had lots of laughs, and so that really gave me, a shot in the arm toward recovery. Next, I had a pre-planned short trip in November. My husband and I had rented a cabin at a campsite about 90 miles north of us in LA, we're in LA. The campsite was about 90 miles away. And it was wonderful because it had a lot of the benefits of camping, like you're out in nature and it's really quiet and beautiful. But we had the comforts of indoor lodging, like a full kitchen and hot water and heat and stuff. So those two things managed to get me above 0. And as kind of a side note, I've been using a scale of 0 to 10 to measure my progress. I don't know how other scales for measuring burnout or recovery progress work. This is just what I came up with. And I didn't actually want to read anyone else's work before I shared this because I didn't want to accidentally incorporate that and then take credit for their work. And this scale is good enough for now, so I don't need to add anything more to my plate to be more precise. So in my scale, 0 is having to go to the hospital. 10 is as good as I could feel given my current life situation. So after my 2 fun events, I got to above 0. So I was probably somewhere between 0.5 and 1. And this is like one of the first things I want to point out, that I call this the danger zone. Because when you're that close to 0, where things are so bad and you're wondering if you should really check into a hospital, when you get even a little bit above 0, it feels so good. It feels amazing. Like the contrast is just striking. So it feels like I'm a lot more recovered than I really am. And when I get even a small amount above 0, it feels like, woohoo, everything's great. I'm good to go. And the risk of overdoing it is huge at that point. So, around April of this year, I bottomed out again. And this time when I was at bottom, and by bottoming out, I mean I had those days where I had 0 energy, was wondering if I should be checked into a hospital, etc. So I started looking for what I could do. And again, as I mentioned, the problem with the literature and the content on burnout is that it's too much information, it's very broad, it's vague, or was out of reach. And I needed a single concrete step to start with, and I couldn't find that. Once I created that for myself, I decided to share this journey in the hopes that it helps someone. So let's go to step 0. I'm not even calling this step 1, I'm calling it step 0 because I think it's that important. So make an appointment with a doctor. So if you've been feeling off and suspect or know that you have burnout, step 0, not even step 1, but step 0 is to make an appointment with a doctor. The symptoms of burnout can be caused by a lot of different things, and it's really important to rule out those other things. So one of the things that happens for me when I'm really burned out is that my brain just doesn't function well. My ability to find options, make decisions, and accomplish things dwindles to very low level. So this idea of making a doctor appointment may seem overwhelming. And so for that reason, I'm going to suggest an idea of where to start. If you have a primary care doctor, start there. Just call or click and make the appointment, even if you can't get one right away. It seems that right now, a lot of things are really backed up, and especially medical appointments, we're waiting a long time for them. And for me, I still haven't gone to my appointment. And as of this recording, I have a few weeks to go, but I ended up having to wait 10 weeks for the appointment. But the appointment is set, and because it was made in the future, like all of the decisions I'm making, all the things I'm scheduling or whatever, all are leading me toward being able to get to that appointment. So let's go on to step 1. Step 1 is to write down a bedtime routine. And there's 2 separate parts to this. So one of them is to create or formalize your bedtime routine, or the steps you take before going to bed at night. The second is that it has to be written down. And I want to encourage you to do this sloppy. It does use whatever you have or like. Don't be afraid to cross things out, draw arrows, scribble. Use a phone app or any piece of scrap paper, but get it written down. So why bedtime? Like, why focus on bedtime? Well, aside from the fact we need a place to start first, so we just need some place to start first. And I think that bedtime is a good place to start because sleep is a foundation of well-being no matter what phase of life you're in, and having a conducive bedtime routine is a good start on improving your sleep. second is that like burnout really lowers your energy. I find that even now that I've covered a bit, my energy is still really low. I have more energy, but still nowhere near what I would consider normal. So anything you can do to improve your energy, which sleep does help with, I think is going to be helpful. And then the final reason I think this is a good thing to consider is that burnout hurts your sleep. At my worst, I was hovering kind of around the border between awake and asleep most of the day, and I never really felt like I was either fully awake or fully asleep. So I'd be having restless sleep, and then all day long I was groggy and sleepy. So that's not a good way to be. It's exhausting, and by working on your sleep, you're kind of making that, it's a first step you can take toward improving your burnout. So the second question is, why write down and focus on a routine? Well, writing it down takes one thing off your mind. So again, burnout severely impairs my ability to think, to sequence things, to make decisions, and just even simple things like that. So what I used to do without thinking now requires me to think and analyze. If you write your bedtime routine down, you no longer need to think about it. It takes one thing off your tired mind. So second is having a bedtime routine, or any process for that matter, set and written down allows you to optimize and improve the routine. So you learn things as you go. Like for example, you learn the best order in which to do things. So maybe you start in the kitchen and do all of the things in the kitchen. So run the dishwasher, set up the coffee, review my schedule. These are the things that I do. I start in the kitchen, I do those things, and then I shut off the lights and move on. So if I didn't know the order for these things and have it written down, what would happen is I'd end up going back and forth to the kitchen multiple times, and then sometimes I'd find myself struggling to remember what was the thing I was going in there for, and then I'd be frustrated because I'd be back in the kitchen not knowing what I was there for. And this is not a good state to be in before you're sleeping. That sort of agitated, frazzled, disappointed, frustrated, none of that's good for sleep. So aside from helping with sleep, this idea of writing out a routine and working on it and optimizing it is an important skill to build. Routines are one way that you can keep your life from falling apart while you're in burnout. If you have a few simple routines that keep at least the minimum things in your life done, you can take away the anxiety of having something big slip through the cracks. And then finally, having a routine gives you a mechanism to implement something new. So I realized this when somebody suggested lavender spray for my pillow at night to help me sleep better. And I really love that idea because I love the smell of lavender, and I like that it's just something simple and concrete. And when I thought about, oh my gosh, how am I going to implement this? How am I going to remember to do this? Where do I keep it? I realized, oh, I've got my bedtime routine. I can just add it to that. And if I didn't already have that routine established and written out, I don't know how I would have implemented the lavender spray. So writing out your bedtime routine is a small step that you can do first, but it also builds the skill of writing a routine and following it. You don't need to buy anything, install anything, or even get it complete or correct. Just slop some things on a piece of paper or into an app and start referring to it. So if this sounds funny or ridiculous to you, then maybe you haven't ever experienced your brain just not working in the way it did when mine was not working when I was at my worst. I've really been kind of surprised at how impaired my brain was and is, and how much external support I need to give my brain to keep my life in order. So this idea of supporting my struggling brain brings me to another important point, which is that as you go through this journey of coming back from burnout, I would encourage you to adopt an attitude of acceptance for what you need. If a written bedtime routine helps you to get ready for bed quickly and without forgetting anything, and you head to bed peacefully and not agitated, then ask yourself, is it better just to write the routine down, or to spend days or weeks upset with yourself because you don't think you should need that? If you can just remove the judgment you may have towards yourself for needing to write out a bedtime routine, you might find it helpful. So with that, you have taken, with those two things, so making your doctor's appointment and writing out a bedtime routine, you will have taken two concrete steps toward recovering from burnout. And this is so important. It's like the very first rung on a ladder that's very close to the ground. It may be a small step, but you need to start with something small in order to reach those higher next rungs. So I have this section called Small Wins, and there's something really powerful and rewarding about taking a concrete, visible step. It sends a signal to yourself that, hey, I can recover from this. I'm taking action. I'm on my way. And it also creates a win. It's something you can feel good about, some tangible success toward recovery, and something you set out to do and you did, and you can feel good about that. It builds confidence. And what I have found is that each win gives me a little burst of strength, stamina, momentum to reach for the next win. So it's kind of like a upwardly compounding effect, where each win gives you like the strength to reach for the next win, and each one's a little bit bigger, and so it lets you reach a little further. So that's it for today. This video is short and concrete by design. I wanted to create a video that was exactly what I needed and couldn't find when I was at my worst. I'm planning on more episodes on this. So if something in this was of value to you and you want to be notified, please hit the subscribe button. And if you like this or got value from it, hit the thumbs up button to let YouTube know. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.